In her youth, Margaret Brown lived in poverty, unexpectedly amassed a multi-million-dollar fortune through marriage to a poor man, and after the sinking of the Titanic, she became known worldwide as a famous activist and philanthropist. There was a creature in our lifeboat whom I couldn't even call a man. There was nothing but his clothing to qualify him as human, so cowardly was he, said Margaret Brown, the millionaire from the infamous Titanic, describing one of the ship's crew members, Robert Hichens. She didn't give this testimony to the investigative commission, as women's accounts weren't taken into consideration there. But Brown found a way to make the truth known through the press, and her information caught the attention of U.S. Senator William Smith, which influenced the further course of the investigation. So let's explore the story of the unsinkable Margaret Molly Brown. Before we start, please support my channel by clicking like and subscribe buttons. The world's largest liner, the Titanic, sank on the night of April 14 to 15, 1912. While crossing the Atlantic from Southampton to New York after colliding with an iceberg, Brown was one of the 712 survivors out of a total of 2,556 passengers and 908 crew members. She was outraged that so few people were saved and blamed the cynical policies of the ship's owning company and the incompetence of some of the crew. Brown could not accept that lifeboats built to carry 40 to 65 people were being hastily filled with only 12 to 30 passengers, mostly from first class. And when the ship sank, only one of the 20 lifeboats dared to return for the people freezing in the icy water with inflatable life vests. The rescuers found only 7 survivors. All others had died from hypothermia. Most of those who perished were third-class passengers who had bought the cheapest tickets and were kept locked up until the last moment to prevent panic on deck. Margaret Taubin was born in 1868 in the American town of Hannibal to a family of poor Irish immigrants. At age 13, she had to leave school and work at a tobacco factory. At 18, she moved with her brother and sister to the mining town of Leadville and found a job in a curtain and carpet shop. She dreamed of marrying a rich man so she wouldn't have to starve and could support her family financially. But at 18, she fell in love with a miner named James Brown. He was 13 years her senior and just as poor as she was. "I wanted a rich man, but I loved Jim Brown," the millionaire later wrote in her memoirs. "I thought about helping my father and decided I would remain unmarried until I met a man who could give that tired old man the comfort I so dreamed of. Jim was as poor as we were. He had no luck in life. At that time, I was struggling with myself. In the end, I decided I would be better off with a poor man I loved than with a rich man whose money attracted me." Soon, fate rewarded Molly. Her husband first became the manager of a silver mine, and later, the Ibex company brought him onto the board of directors and awarded him 12.5% of the shares. This happened thanks to his innovative method, which helped discover not only silver, but also gold deposits in the mine. Thus, a simple Irish miner gradually became a millionaire and bought a house in a prestigious area of Denver, where, along with him and his wife, Margaret's parents and sisters also settled. Margaret tried her hand at acting and even ran for the Colorado State Senate, though she withdrew her candidacy before the final vote. Mrs. Brown was offended that the press ignored her campaign, and her own husband skeptically stated, "A woman should appear in the newspaper only 3 times, at birth, marriage, and death." The couple's true passion became travel. They visited nearly half the world, France, Germany, Japan, India, and were a happy couple until Mrs. Brown caught her husband cheating. They never officially divorced, but Margaret made him leave. She received financial compensation, the house in Denver, and $700 a month from Mr. Brown so she could continue traveling. Molly ended up on the Titanic by chance. She had just arrived in Paris from Egypt and planned to stay for a few weeks. But news of her grandson's illness forced her to buy a ticket on the first ship headed for the United States. And that ship was the Titanic, embarking on its first, and as it turned out, final voyage. In James Cameron's famous film Titanic, there is a scene where Molly Brown desperately begs the sailor commanding the lifeboat to return and rescue more passengers. The others remain silent, and he angrily threatens, "Shut up, ma'am, or I'll throw you overboard." This scene is not a fabrication of the screenwriters, it really happened. According to passenger testimonies, Robert Hichens could have taken at least 40 more people into the lifeboat, but was afraid they would cling to the sides and capsize it. Brown testified that he did not support the passengers, but instead told them they were doomed, that they would drift for days without water, and eventually perish. She essentially took command of the lifeboat herself, instructing the women to row. Meanwhile, Hichens wrapped himself in all the available blankets, drank from a flask of alcohol he refused to share, and did nothing to help others stay warm. Physically strong, courageous, and confident, Brown effectively saved everyone in that lifeboat. When they spotted lights in the distance at 4:30 a.m., Hichens claimed it was just a star. But Brown and the women rowed toward the light, and it turned out to be the rescue ship Carpathia, which spotted them. As soon as she stepped aboard the rescue liner, Brown began helping people. She compiled lists of survivors, sent telegrams to relatives, and raised money for immigrants who had lost everything in the Titanic disaster. She managed to collect $10,000. When Brown returned to land, she was hailed as a heroine. When asked by a journalist how she managed to survive, she replied, "It's the luck of the Browns. We are unsinkable." Upon learning that her grandson had recovered, she didn't immediately go back to Denver, but stayed in New York to continue helping the victims of the shipwreck. Brown regretted that, as a woman, she was not allowed to testify before the American Investigative Committee about what she had experienced aboard the Titanic. But she picked up her pen and wrote 3 large articles that were published in the Newport Herald on May 28, 29, and 30, 1912. As a result, the shipping company had no chance to hide from the public some of the very inconvenient facts about the disaster. Brown gained immense popularity and became a legend of her time. Fame and wealth did not spoil this unbreakable woman. She gave financial aid to the disaster's poorer victims and campaigned for women's rights. With her national profile on the rise, Margaret Brown was called upon to lend her influence during one of Colorado's darkest chapters. In April 1914, tensions had reached a boiling point in Ludlow, where coal miners, many of them immigrants, had been striking for months against the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company. The miners demanded relief from punishing hours, unsafe conditions, and meager wages. But their demands were repeatedly rejected by the company, which was part of the vast Rockefeller business empire. As the situation deteriorated, desperate appeals for help began arriving on Margaret's doorstep, particularly from women in the mining camps who saw in her a potential advocate. The conflict exploded on April 20th, when violence erupted between the striking miners and private guards employed by the company. The clash, now known as the Lello Massacre, left around 20 people dead, including women and children, and shocked the nation with its brutality. It quickly became one of the most infamous labor disputes in American history. Margaret Brown, with her unique ties to both working-class communities in the West and elite circles in the East, traveled to Ludlow at the request of concerned citizens and labor leaders alike. Though both sides hoped to claim her support, she walked a careful line. She resisted aligning with the more radical factions calling for the governor's resignation, yet she did not shy away from holding the Rockefeller interests accountable for their role in the escalating violence. Using her platform and media connections, Margaret publicly advocated for the miners' rights while privately urging John D. Rockefeller Jr. to reconsider his company's approach. Faced with mounting public criticism and Margaret's persistent pressure, Rockefeller eventually agreed to limited reforms and improved conditions for workers. In the wake of the massacre, corporate America began to embrace public relations as a tool for maintaining influence, while reformers like Margaret Brown proved that moral authority could still challenge powerful interests. As president of the Survivors Committee, which she had founded, Brown presented Arthur Henry Rostron, the captain of the Carpathia, with a silver cup in gratitude for rescuing the Titanic's passengers. Each crew member of the Carpathia also received a medal. Molly also gave Rostron a jade talisman she had bought in Egypt for good luck. In one interview, she said she did not support the rule that women should be rescued before men. If women demand equal rights on land, why not be equal at sea as well? She stated. Families should not be separated at such moments. In 1914, upon hearing of the outbreak of war in Europe, she left the U.S., traveled to Picardy, France, and went to the front to help care for the wounded. 10 years later, together with her friend Anne Morgan, the founder of the American Committee for Devastated Regions, Brown helped establish the Franco-American Historical Museum at the Chateau de Blériancourt. In 1931, it became the National Museum of Franco-American Cooperation. She was widowed in 1922 when her former husband died of a heart attack in a hospital. Having lost contact with her children and faced with inheritance issues, Brown died alone in her sleep at the Barbizon Hotel in New York on October 26, 1932. The doctor believed it was a stroke, but an autopsy revealed a large brain tumor. It seems Margaret had lived with it for years without complaining about her health. It simply wasn't in her character. A few months before her death, Brown was awarded the Legion of Honor for her wartime contributions. In America, she came to be known as the Unsinkable Molly Brown. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to support my channel by clicking like and subscribe buttons.